Usually we go north towards Kalabaka, where I'm going, and it was a surprise to see these large mountains snow-covered like they are. Along this route are half-completed freeway projects where there are piles of steel just rotting or rusting away. Seems like everything on hold, no heavy equipment operating. Pretty country up here. Scoping this out this afternoon to make the hike tomorrow, but I thought I'd better video this now. So here's the trailhead, winds up I think over that little saddle and up to the right, up to the top, and then along the top and back over to the far side of this expanse of rock. This is as far as I'll go this afternoon. There's Kalabaka, more of it to the right that you can't see. But a beautiful place, really. Beautiful place for early monks to have spent their life. So I'll stop here and leave the rest for tomorrow. Certainly dramatic views of the people that have their homes nestled just outside this giant crevice. I'm going to work around the side of this. I think I have to go lower to do it and find the Hermit Caves. I don't know what this toadstool is for, but I think that's a home shrine. Seen in several religions throughout the world. People want to guarantee they'll hear the lovely chirping of birds all the time. Here I think we see some of those possible caves the hermits lived in. That one stoned up either to keep people out or something else in. I'm looking at that hole up there. I'll pan up to it. It looks human-like, but on the other hand, it appears that water either gathers or comes out there and drains down, creating that stain. We're on Asazi country. I'd be looking closely at that cave for a square house. And a Byzantium church. Maybe I will have a chance to explore further, but apparently from the iconography on that, over that doorway, this is a church, quite nondescript, quite small. But it does have its own little bell tower of sorts with, wouldn't you guess, its own little watchdog. Here I have a pathway. Hopefully it's not someone's house and it's the one route that I want. Well, there's the remains of a once substantial structure, whatever it was. And equally curious but more modern and better shape, this building has these two half cylinders with firing ports, it looks like, as well as an airport, that square one there. Notice here, high windows. Otherwise, no windows here except for that high window converted into a exit for that smokestack. And over the door, there's an arched niche rather than a window. So it seems to allude to religion of some sort. It seems more fortress-like. Maybe it served both functions. But there's a nice trail anyway. Sprays of flowers on this rock, particularly these lovely little purple ones. Of course, it is spring. Well, you have to grant the monks one thing. They certainly knew how to pick spectacular locations. Look at that view. I'm guessing that all this is wind erosion and maybe some ice freezing and thawing. But it seems like I can see something in that cave there of the three, the one to the right, like a marker or something. I'll give all these a little bit of a pan. But you can imagine for the ascetic living up in one, getting into one of these as well as living into it, must have satisfied all of their needs. Masochistic as they may seem to me. And I wonder if there were a hierarchy of monks occupying those vertical caves. Pretty six-petaled flower I hadn't seen before anywhere. I wonder when and how man came to believe that flowers were inherently beautiful. Animals like bees or animals and insects like bees and birds can't, I think, articulate the idea of beauty. They just know that it's a source of nectar, and the colors can identify what each species may need. Aren't these pretty? First I thought these were clover, but they're not. In fact, they look almost as though they're petaled or leafed rather than actual flowers. Is this a pretty little hillside spot? I don't know what plant this is, but it always reminds me of carrots. And it must be a family of plant that looks like that. Different plant, and I'm curious. See, this bee, there's a bee over here. It doesn't show any interest in those plants, those purple ones. Only the yellow. I wonder if in their day, if you stood in a spot like this, the acoustics were such that you might hear the hum or the drone of their chants or murmurings. It's interesting that even now there's a meager source of water, but then of course water carved out that little gorge that winds up to the left. I wonder if they ever communicated with each other, gathered together for some reason, common services or special holy days or barbecue. Was there a hierarchy of age, for example? The older ones had the lower, more accessible caves, and as each died off, the next youngest had the right to occupy. No surprise how these caves could have attracted the monks. You gotta wonder though if they didn't over time evolve strategies for making life a little bit easier, like if nothing else piling rocks and so forth up against across the front of a cave to provide some protection against the elements. May or may not answer some of our questions. I'm not sure hermits would have done this, but certainly man did. Well, it's pretty interesting anyway. Nicely done walls and corners. You can imagine this is a community of somebody, some people. Also a lot of black soot on the roof, but also a lot of animal dung, as you can see here. Not that this wouldn't be a natural place for them to be, whether man had constructed something like this or not, but look at the nice corners there. Isn't this a pretty flower? And notice that that's just one variant of color of this particular flower. Huh. It's dangerously perched on the vertical edge of a big rock and on its long sloping edge. But this may be as close as I get to it. They actually built supporting floors up there. Interconnecting that bunch right there. And there's something over here, and there's one down in here I can't see. But notice the Anasazi type ladder, the portion that still remains there. The valley from these, which are on our left, is another complex, far more well developed. Looks like they enclosed that whole thing with successive floors. Looks like about 5 or 6. Back on the road, and we're looking at the ones I shot first. Not able to get all that close, but there's like almost a monastery over there, and maybe that's exactly what it was. But a rather sophisticated building, a couple of chimneys and everything else, but it may be supported by the ground rather than totally suspended in the air like those others. Although you can see some small ones right to the left there. I don't know if they're part of that building. So maybe tomorrow I'll get over that far. This is the small town of Castrati. Spectacular scene, unfortunately, cropped up by businesses. But it makes its point. This is the view from my hotel room, Hotel King Kalabaka. And tomorrow I will hike up to that monastery up there. And from there, I should go across to another one somewhere up in there. I don't know whereabouts. It's on the map. This is my room for $27 a night, recommended to me by Carmen at City Circus Hostel. It's a plain, simple room, more than I'm used to and quite sufficient, to say the least. So I continue this morning at about, I think 8:15, up to the monastery up on this first bluff, Stephanos, and whatever else is up there, and as far as I can go, wrapping around in that direction quite a ways beyond this little canyon. As I wind my way up this rather moderate climb up through these majestic bluffs away from today's Kalabaka town, I try to imagine what the soon-to-be monks and nuns had in their minds. What frightened them so much, or the optimist would say inspired them so much, to compel them into this life of sacrifice. The word I actually intended to use was suicide, not sacrifice. I allowed myself to slip in to that gratuitous convention granted priests, nuns, monks, and all the rest of them. As with the Camino de Santiago, pilgrims, quote unquote, will leave stones in particular spots. And I think these are cairns which are built stone upon stone by several individuals. They leave these as a symbolic sloughing off, if you will, of their sins, or the guilt of their sins, because they are suffering this penitence of climbing up here, or of hiking the Camino. I have no stone, almost to the top. Look at that field on that ledge, covered with those purple flowers. Too pretty, eh? We may be walking over there through that cleft. If you look closely, I think there's probably a monastery perched on top of that. Let's go see. Can't be sure, but something's up there. So we'll go to our left once we get to the road above us, and then we'll go back to our right, following this road for much of the route on top. Parking is up on the hill, and this was a walkway down to wherever this place is. I don't know what it is. I intercepted it off the trail down there. Anyway, we'll enter up here and look at some steep steps. Guess that's cars way over there. And I guess we've arrived somewhere on top. I've just entered this building up those stairs. That looks like it might have been a kitchen. And these may be individual rooms of either nuns or monks. And the building looks actually new, or at least well maintained inside and outside. Perhaps the benches here are for us or for meditation. Who knows? So the gentleman that let me in here is letting me take pictures, even though it's not allowed. The man who I thought was letting me take pictures was actually not working here, but going to the church service since it's Sunday. And he said he would just watch out for me, which he did, even when I offered to give him something. No. Windlass, or pulley system, if you will, that was originally used to haul up not only goods into these high cliff-top temples, but people. I think that hook there represents a hook for grabbing onto this basket, which had a stone weight, of course, to carry it down. Interesting. This was a rolling carriage that you would put things on, then roll it out into this space here, lifted up by the windlass, pull the trolley out, and then lower it down. Whoa. They still had to climb with all that stuff all the way up from Kalabaka, which probably wasn't Kalabaka at one time. Much sweat dripped on the floor from the manual use, no doubt, of that grinding stone. But these were they grinding pestles, perhaps? And maybe this was the room of the head priest or nun. This is interesting because it's a slightly bent but a well-worn beam. What role did it play in the past? And here another door, and this clearly peacocks. Hey, yeah. This, of course, is the nicely prepared route for we pansies of the 21st century, non-thrill seekers that we are. That's interesting. It looks like a limb is broken off from something and caught in that tree. There must have been some effect on the psyche of people who spent a good portion of their lives on top of a rock that you could only access by that windlass. I mean, that might have been worth being a monk or nun alone, was the thrill of riding up and down on that circus-like ride. Excuse my irreverence. We just visited the holy monastery. This little spot may have been a platform for a hermit. Wow, how did he get here? If you look down there, it was a challenge. Spectacular view, eh? I think we're next to the road which I have to traverse to get to Stephanos Monastery, and then probably backtrack on that same road. This cableway is how they get goods apparently into that monastery easily. And there's something down there with trees around that rectangle. It's probably some other monastery, but I don't know anything about it. God, what spectacular views from up here, eh? See, we enter on a bridge, and it's, whether it was a fragile bridge in the past to protect the monastery, I don't know, but it easily would have been achieved. That's a pretty little gardening. Other side here. Pretty though, isn't it? Reflections, since you can't take photographs, is the iconostasy is a magnificently high, large, wood-carved piece of furniture, for lack of a better term, some of which includes vertical posts that are cut so they're hollowed in the inside. In other words, the relief goes right into the center. Very, very clever work, but of course they had a lot of time. The artwork seems brand new. Whether it's great artwork, I don't know. I just don't know. As one blogger quipped, he said great art, which I don't know, but a lot of tortured, gruesome paintings. And the Catholic Church loves to wallow in that. Whether they're depicting saints that they want you to be feeling pitiful towards, or whether they're showing what's going to happen to those who are condemned to hell, so you'll do what the priests tell you to do. And off we go to that monastery up there. This gives a pretty good idea what a perch that first holy monastery that we visited is on. Almost like a giant molar, don't you think? Kalabaka. I think somewhere off to the left down there is where I found the Hermitage Caves. There's another little monastery. We may miss that one today. We're going up to the one just to the left of that person standing on the point. It's the small town of Castrati down below. And here a cluster of monasteries. It's one of those monasteries we passed. I don't know if I'll get to see that one up close. I may take a shortcut down the hill. There's somebody who is getting their thrill out of being up on top of one of those things. Good for them. And off to the right, the next monastery that I am going to. Still under extensive restoration, remodeling. What air? Another windlass. Notice how it was geared at the top there, the net. Let's take a look at how far down that was. Whoa. Here's a new way with a steel cable. Looks like they may have burned out one motor already. Looks like a completely new tower unless it's very nicely restored. Must make some lovely noises with 3 bells down below and I think 3 up there on top, one big one. For whatever the reason is, all it's being completely rebuilt. Again, you must believe these airy heights affects the mindset somehow. When your only way up and down is in a basket. Otherwise your perimeter is a long fall. The dividing gap between hell, me, this side, and heaven, that side. People are really in a difficult position because if they look the other way, there's another monastery. Did they have it better? The problem for monks and nuns is the amount of time they had to ponder those issues. You ever think that once in a while a nun or a monk standing up in that little window on the far upper right of this monastery would look across and see their opposite sex and say, what would my life have been like? What would our life have been like if we'd have chosen a different path and met under different circumstances? These are the issues that these folks must have pondered. I just think of these purple leafy things, which are very much like the bigger version I saw yesterday, but with the blue flower at the end, are just so pretty. They're about 3/8 of an inch in diameter max. So they're quite petite, as are the other flowers. Too cool. The non-monk way to do it. Right up inside. The way into here, just crossed over, I think, a bridge. We'll see, look back. Okay, so here's this windlass. I don't know what the little sticks sticking out there are, unless it was to tie off the rope if necessary. Notice that you could get 4 people, or at least 4 sides working, maybe 2 people per side. But this must have been, for me, it'd be like the entrance to Dachau prison. For others, you were entering into heaven, even though the gates weren't pearly. You wonder if these tables, if in fact something like them was original, were used for sorting out goods or before they went up or down. And here we go. Here are plows. Here are old tools. Typical tools, you don't know if those are original. Canteen. They're illustrating the use of a plane in that vise to make that window frame. So this would have been a storage area, illustrating for wine. Although those are glass bottles, not sure if they had them, but they would have had those jugs. This was the old carpenter shop converted into this museum, which is neat, actually. Oh, butter churns. I wonder on the nearby hills if they kept cows. Probably olive press, maybe grape or wine press. I think the boys were tipplers, or girls. What these pretty staffs were for, walking sticks, would make sense. Here a bigger grape press according to this, but maybe also for olives. Ah, they did store some substantial beverages, or liquids at least. I haven't seen wooden kegs that size that are that old. A couple of old guns. Classic. Look at the way that's held together. Those huge beams on the outside that are curved just to fit that barrel. And how they're locked together in this fashion here. Pulling the one that goes from left to right tighter and tighter and against the vertical one.
It had autonomy in the food and everything. Why? Because they had quite 3,000 of goats. Think about it. They used to produce too much butter, too much cheese. 3,000 goats, yes. They had many land. They used to produce grain. And, of course, they had many vineyards.
No. No. More older, more traditional morphe, if that's how you pronounce it. This is the ossuary. Well, at least they got some immortality. Notice how small the skulls seem to be. Imagine the thoughts that they had, all of these thoughts. As Nathaniel Hawthorne would say, all for naught, because we last too short a time. Nothing spectacular, just another vantage point. Notice how it's built around the rock outcropping. Original mosaic, pretty. There's another one here. They're a dark uniform. $1940-41. God, an old camera. This is depicting a Nazi soldier taken down, as they say, at the moment when he was trying to erect the Nazi flag over one of these peaks. Can't blame the Germans for feeling guilty. Even today, it's just hard for them, I imagine, to walk away from the fact that it was their flesh and blood that did that. That were the Nazis. I've got a feeling that EU dollars sometime in a not too distant past, like yesterday, funded the restoration or rebuilding of all of this area to a considerable tune. This is an impressive Byzantium style church. Haven't seen very many this large here. It's nice to try to imagine this when it was old and new and used. It's this timber that's alleged by myth to be a timber from Noah's Ark. Of course, the difference between a Catholic myth and a Catholic alleged truth is mythological. The problem with a grand restoration like this is you don't know how much is original, how much is brand new, how much is a reproduction. The views do get your attention. I don't know how rock climbers do it. I get scared just hanging on the side of that wall for any reason. On the other side of that hill is the monastery I was just visiting, and thanks to that guide's assistance, I've taken this trail, which goes behind this hill, and we wrap this way, and to a point, and then on a dirt road down to Castrati, which should be down in there somewhere, or maybe off to the left. Brief chat as I was walking along and confirming my correct trail. Talked to a man whose father had immigrated to the United States, made enough money, came back to Greece and raised his family. Straki is down below to the left. Looks like a telephone pole or a flagpole. Down there is where we're going. You can see the statue. This is that tour guide's hiking group. God, why are you hiking a mass of people jabbering away? I don't know. There's an old abandoned monastery. You can see a modern stairway on the right-hand side giving us access. I don't think I'll take the time and effort to do that. There's the statue. Last set of stairs. Now, to see if this door opens. Looks pretty modern up there. Some pretty substantial beams supporting it. That looks like an elevator. Although exactly how it works, I don't know. Unless it just drops down along the side. Yeah, there are some cables, so perhaps that's what it does.